Hey, that intro go hard, bro. That
Yeah.
perspective at the end. Hey, man. Hey, what's
Mhm.
I just like the dude that look like you to go, oh.
that, Tab? That's not funny. That's that's not. We not Tab. Let me tell you something, bro. We not
We're not
finna
doing that
mess with
today.
me today. We not doing that
Why?
today.
Y'all not gonna
We
be
not.
picking on me every week?
Well, is your beard black today?
It is. I just went to the
Oh,
barber shop last night.
Okay. Okay.
it
Well,
looks extra black actually, like
No,
high definition black.
I gotta stop going though, y'all. I was in the barber shop for a long time last night. Tav said, "Well, I've never been in here this long." He made me feel bad, man.
How did BJ just jump on and he already knows?
He already knew.
It's all
I
right.
love the
Everybody
pause.
do something, man.
Everybody can tell artificial flavor when they see it.
I don't care. You know what? But everybody's still buying art. A lot of people don't go organic. They tell you that much artificial.
I am organic.
You need to fix that though.
It's called self-care. Do what makes you feel good.
yeah, do what
Yeah.
makes you feel good. There we go. Let them know, BJ. Let them know. Well, as you guys join in with us today, we appreciate you guys for being here. As you can see, we have another member of the Braspective community here with us today. Brother BJ, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, man, and let people know who you are.
Oh man, my pleasure, brother. So my name is Dr. BJ Snowden, and I happily come on to have a conversation with you brothers about some scholarly and academic stuff, but then how it really translates to the real world. So I'm happy. I've done a lot of work in my career as an educator, education administrator, as a researcher, and just feel blessed to be able to be with you and talk to you about some serious stuff. So I'm happy, please feel free to toss the questions my way, and I look forward to a really good conversation with you all.
Yes, sir.
Facts, facts. We love it. We love it. He's also a member and a brother of the greatest fraternity in the world. Do y'all know what that fraternity is?
My
Would that
shoulder,
be
my shoulders just started going. Yeah.
Let them know, right?
Yeah.
is that a Kappa Psi Fraternity Incorporated?
Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated.
Incorporated.
IB chapter. What y'all say? I
No,
better
don't even
what?
start.
He's not IB. We're IB. He.
I am the No Sympathy New Sigma chapter, so we can talk about
Oh
that.
yeah, I
That's a whole different level.
I forgot that. I forgot.
Yeah,
That's why I
that.
wasn't
You
offended.
all right?
That's why I wasn't offended in the
Yeah,
pregame. I wasn't offended
yeah.
because
Hey,
you guys aren't talking about me.
but y'all affiliated though. Like y'all like this.
Oh
You
yeah,
know what I'm saying?
we
Y'all
are. No,
affiliated.
Tied
there is
all the way in.
definitely.
Tied all the
Yeah,
way
we
in.
all the way in
Uh,
like
so
this.
what what happens to them happens to you. You know what I'm saying? So that's just kind of how that's just how that
That
works.
sounded
But
real
it's
familiar. Did I teach you that? Okay, just
well,
making
that's
sure.
what's up, man. Hey, well, we here today. Obviously, on perspective, we try to bring the people conversations, real conversations that we as brothers, as black men, like to have. Whether we talking, on the chat, or we talking, on our mini fellas trips, or on the Marco Polo, just regular conversations about things that we are dealing with. And today we are going to talk about what is critical race theory and what's going on in the world and how that affects us. So before the brothers really get into it and we get into our perspectives, how about Brother BJ, Dr. BJ, you let us know exactly what critical race theory is.
So I'm happy to do that. What's really interesting to me is that this term critical race theory has really been around 40 some odd years. And it's really just right now how it's sort of bubbled up into the public sphere that I think has made it a mainstream topic. And it's always important to get to the source of that mainstream topic. It's always important to get to the roots and the origins of it. So let me break this down for you in I think a pretty simple way. All right. So there are essentially 5 elements to critical race theory, just 5. The first one is that race is a social construct. And that really speaks to the idea that, we as human beings created this conversation about race. We as human beings created this idea of race because biologically it doesn't exist. No. So this is hilarious. So the second part of this is that the central characters, the central component of critical race theory is basically racism is a core element to everything that we do. Okay. And as a society, we've built this in to our culture, to our legal system, to our educational system. It's really having racism as a central theory or a central element, building block to our society that we've created. And the third tenet is that social justice is core to critical race theory. This was not designed to create divide. This whole theory was designed to better explain social justice and the movement beyond the civil rights movement, right? Where the civil rights movement was very like in step, one small step at a time, moving forward in progress. When the progress seemed to slow down, we had to ask ourselves as a society, is it possible just to move beyond race, or is race something we actually have to deal with? And then fourth is that it's important to have knowledge about race, and this is where the history of it comes in, right? Beyond just the storytelling that happens in our families, but to have it ingrained into our system, we learn about our history and we learn about race. And then making this an interdisciplinary conversation. So this is not just about a conversation about the social aspects of something. This is sociology, this is English, this is history, this is art, this is industry, this is law, right? This is health, this is medicine. So we want to really frame the conversation around not just everybody's racist, but it really is that racism is a core building block of how we've created our society. And, it's applicable to a bunch of different industries. And I think that it's important for us to just talk about it from our perspective, because the more we talk about it, the more questions we ask about it, the more we'll understand. So I hope that's a pretty short, I literally have an hour lecture on this. So to break it down in like 10 minutes or even 5 minutes, I think leaves a lot out, but I'm happy to make this more of a conversation than a lecture tonight.
Oh no, man, that was phenomenal. I think that information was important because a lot of people, when we talk about critical race theory, CRT, a lot of people don't really understand what the conversation is about. They think this is something new, right? They think this is something that has come as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement, and not understanding that this, this framework was constructed in 1980, right? It's been around, and it was constructed
I
by
mean,
lawyers.
even older than that. So, I mean, I literally used this book on my dissertation in 2009, and it's 20 years old, right?
Right.
The definitive book in critical race theory actually goes back to law studies, and that was in the mid 70s. So even those of us in education, as an educational scholar, I mean, my research was on African American male success in college. And I was able to apply critical race theory as that, thinking about how the systemic barriers in higher education are basically a part of the problem and not just something for Black students to navigate. But if we're really going to make this better for us Black students to get through college, we have to interrogate the system and recognize where there's racism and racist practices and policies. So that's how I applied it. At the time, a 20-something-year-old theory, but had nothing to do with, again, everybody's a racist. It has to do with understanding the systemic creation of a system that is rooted in racism.
The reason I find this interesting too is because, I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with both of you guys. I mean, my first law enforcement job was at an educational institution. And so I've been around you guys a long time and seen all of these different practices come in place. I could say that, and I say this proudly, I mean, a lot of people don't know, you actually assisted in me getting my first police job. But if we just look at the key components of how police, education, and all those things combined with each other played out within that process and the results of what we were able to accomplish in that time frame, I think that this is also a very, very important conversation to have. And I know we'll include how the structure of criminal justice plays into the critical race theory, because outside of it being in the educational realm, now we talk about how, like you said, it affects different industries, and law enforcement being one of those key components of an industry that is affected by the criminal race or the critical race theory.
Yeah, it was something I was thinking about too. My bad, P. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, something I was thinking about too. You remember how we had like a high school reading list, right? So everybody had this reading list. You get like Catcher in the Rye or
Great Gatsby.
Great Gatsby, some crazy book like that. Something that Gilligan's. I mean, not Gilligan's Island. What's that? Gulliver's Travel. You get a book like that to read, right? I have the first time I ever read a book that was something in regards to race in America was in college, but I had to go seek it. It wasn't on my undergraduate list. It was none of that stuff that they had prerequisites for me to get something else. I had to go seek it myself. So that's when I got into the Du Boises and all the other stuff that goes along to what we're talking about. But it was never on any of the lists that they ever gave us in school, whether that be high school or in college.
Right, and even those lists are about exposing you to Black authors, right? It's not about exploring the system in which the authors were living and had to create the art. So it's funny how they're like, oh, it's almost like being tossed a biscuit, right? A little thing to pacify you, and so you don't ask the deeper question. What's right behind the fact that there aren't any books that represent me in this reading?
Yeah, I was going there. I was going there right. My bad, Pete. One more quick little thing, because what happens is what they're trying to ban literally is like the expression of being different. Like, we're not a part of that culture of white America or anything that is not a part of the institution. So anything that's not a part of the institution is different. If we're banning it, don't teach it, don't think about it, no nothing. Like, it's all vanilla. How are we going to live in a world like that where we're teaching our kids to look at things just that way?
But Jeff, just before we even get into that, the other portion of that is that, are we banning that, right? Because I don't know if this is a component of it or not, but if we're going to go that route, is it safe for me to talk about how we're implementing the LGBTQ community in?
But they're going to ban that too, Taff. Like, everything that is not a part of the institution is going to be banned.
So,
to a certain degree.
So wait. So one thing that I wanted to make sure that we get out is one thing that Dr. Snowden said was that it's systematic. That's one. That's like a baseline thing, and like Jacoby was saying, it flows throughout everything. So it's that systematic process, or the way that our jobs and locations were created was through a system that always had African Americans not part of that system. So that's one. And then the second, it's not a ban per se. It's just a dismissal or a non-inclusion of things dealing with race or sex in the context that, like, not saying that it's different, but in the context that it's not talking about if it's a minority or other, like Jacoby, what you used to my othering, it's the others that they're excluding. So it's not banning it per se, but it's saying, oh, we're just not going to look at those because we don't want to really talk about how a race or a sexuality is better than the other. So they're going to talk about it, but not everybody's. They're going to speak on things, but not everybody. It's, again, a systematic way of saying we're going to talk about different sexual things and we're going to talk about race, but it's the way we're going to do it that everybody's not included.
See, what I find interesting, though, Parrish, is that to me, it feels like a ban. And it only feels like a ban because I'm looking at it like in the future, right? If I look at, and I know we're going to get there, but if I look at how this topic in itself has basically cultivated into a superiority of some people and exclusion of others, people aren't exposed to these other type of topics that we're talking about. Therefore, when we are faced with these issues as adults, then we come into a setting where people are like, that doesn't matter. That's not important. That's excluded. We're the best. So ultimately, the way that the educational system or whatever the critical race theory is presenting itself is, eventually it comes to the point in which things are banned and people are banned.
I guess my issue with it is, I think people may have the conversation wrong about what actually is occurring with critical race theory in itself. You have, if you look at it, it's people who kids are in grade school. Jeff and I talked about this the other day, who kids are in grade school that they're protesting. They're not necessarily teaching critical race theory in kindergarten, in first grade, second grade, in even high school, right? It's a framework that is utilized in, like, you know, in graduate school and college and things of that nature in certain programs. Now, when you're in college, obviously, I've been a college professor, P. We've all kind of, in certain degree, have taught on a college level. College professors are pretty much in control for the most part of what they teach, right? So they're not even looking at where the conversation is actually happening. They're trying to control what's happening in the K through 12 programs, which is not really critical race theory. They're trying to take out talking about race and talking about race critically, right? Talking about systematic racism and things of that nature in the school systems. That's a whole different conversation. The media,
I agree.
The media has hijacked critical race theory and lumped anything associated with it. Diversity and inclusion, right? Black Lives Matter. Any of those conversations, they have taken that and thrown that into the lump of what critical race theory is. And to me, that's my problem. They constantly change the narrative of what the conversation actually is and hijack it and then frame it in the way that they want to frame it to then attack critical race theory. And critical race theory is not even the issue.
But the question is why? Why are they defensive? And I say they. So I'm speaking of people who don't necessarily have the history of the topic. It sounds electrifying. The title, critical race theory. And if you think about young kids in elementary, there is no way in the world, like you were saying, that a third grade teacher is going to have the ability to fundamentally break down and articulate what critical race theory is to a bunch of 9 and 10-year-olds. And even if they did, it would go right over their heads and it would be something that was just a waste of time. What they are doing and what they're scared of, and my theory on that is, right, being made the villain in a narrative where they always see themselves as the hero. And I think that when you think about it in regards to a story, right, the hero, you got to have an enemy, you got to have a versus. And what we're doing is we're creating an enemy out of a theory because it makes people uncomfortable to talk about not being the good guy.
Right.
And that's hard.
And let me add one more piece to that too, just to piggyback off of what Dr. Snowden and Dewan said. It's in the school system, and the reason why I was talking about removing is they're not teaching certain topics that emphasize the racial divides that happen. So you're not going to find a lot of teachers now, maybe not in the third grade, but when you get to like high school, Jim Crow being removed or stuff that happened in Oklahoma being removed. So it becomes a removal of certain stories within history that shows the negative impact that other cultures had on African Americans, minorities in general. So now it is having students that always been reading about how the white guy did this. They're like, oh snap, this is why Black Lives Matter, because there's a trail of people being treated differently in a negative manner that, you know, sorry to say, my history contributed to, not mine, but that some people may feel that way.
Not to interrupt and keep going after I said it, but you just said it perfectly. The narrative is the white savior, Christopher Columbus, Abraham Lincoln, right? JFK, we read the white savior and how white people helped and how that's the history of America. We learn, right? The white savior and not the white destroyer, right? Not the system that led to Black people disenfranchisement, Black people being removed from housing and jobs and economical opportunities, because that's what the critical race theory is looking at, the systems that contributed and not just the individual. They want people to think that racism is an individual thing when the systems can be racist as well.
Racism in itself is strategic. I mean, if you look at all the points, people are taught how to conquer other people out of racial like moments in life. It's not about individuals and how an individual did it. People are taught how to conquer other people just out of the theory of race. So I think
other groups.
Yeah, other groups. Yeah, it's just not an individual thing. I think it's a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, Pete, go ahead. We didn't mean to cut you off, but last thing before you go, it's like when you read the Philadelphia Negro, it don't talk about the people being racist. It talk about the system being racist and why that situation happened in Philadelphia the way it did. But I didn't learn that until college, and I had to read that book myself, look at that. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, and even think about that, right? So how old were you when you figured out what redlining was, or you were taught what redlining was?
So that was when I read that book. I was 21-ish.
Right. Yeah. just the idea of how a community can be manufactured and zoned in a way where race was a determining factor. They put race in the policy and statutes that dealt with lending.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes.
And what year? And wait. And what year was that? 1930s. That was in the 30s.
Yeah.
That wasn't.
Well, and
that's not now. 1930s.
Well,
People got to watch The Banker.
You can still find loan contracts where it has to be now eliminated, because if it's just rolled over when you're talking about the neighborhood or whatever, you'll find this language in cities all over the country. Urban centers, rural centers, the whole development of the suburbs is based on coming back from the military right after the Great War, folks getting that GI and folks getting that FHA loan, and then people, white soldiers wanting to flee the urban communities and being able to buy a house, which is a whole tie into generational wealth and all that other stuff. But the idea is that the suburbs were created as an opportunity to escape people of color. When you escape people of color and were given the opportunity to build generational wealth, that further exacerbated the socioeconomic impact for people of color. And when you did that, that's something we should talk about. That is understanding that and unpacking that is a tenet of, or a variant of, talking about critical race theory. So why shouldn't we be talking about that when we talk about economics, when we talk about history, when we talk about sociology, when we talk about English, right? Whatever the subject is, it really is frustrating.
You breezed over something. Come back to it though. Let's rewind, because what you said is a whole bar, and people don't know that, right? They don't know that when the war ended, white soldiers were giving free housing. They were given loans with a low interest rate, and sometimes no money down in the suburbs, right?
Yep.
So
new communities, brand new
community. They were given brand new communities. They were given manufacturing jobs. They were giving opportunities to start families, to create wealth, to grow when they came back from the war. But blacks wasn't given those opportunities. So one of the things you always hear some people say is, well, my great grandfather pulled himself up by his own bootstraps. Nah, he didn't, bro. The government pulled him up. That free land, land that y'all got, the government gave y'all that. Y'all got free land. Y'all had free opportunity to start.
Dewan, you just got to change one more
piece.
You just said one more piece. Opportunities, and what you should have said, if you don't mind me correcting and changing that, is head start. That's not an opportunity. That's a head start. That's a totally different thing. That's not. We all given opportunities, some better than others, but what you're describing is actually really a head start.
And there's one more piece. There's one more piece that we haven't added in there, and that's that you can't sell upon that. So once they got to that, we made it, I guess, if you want to say, to turn around and say, hey, I want to sell this. Then there was laws passed that you can only sell it to certain individuals. Now, if you're telling me that's not a construct within the system, come on now. So not even did your grandfather get assistance, but then there was a law to say, hey, even if there's other people that can benefit from that, don't include them. And these are the individuals. It didn't say everybody. It said a certain population of individuals cannot engage in that. So that's another thing to add to, we pulled ourselves up by the bootstraps. Okay. No, you really did.
Well, what's the question then? Answer the question then. Why are people mad? Why is there an uproar about us simply communicating people real history, right? Factual history.
Because that's not their history.
It's another form of oppression. They don't want to hear these stories. They don't want to see this stuff because it takes away from them being a good guy.
And it wasn't their history. If you look at this, right, and I hope we get to go into this, and I'm going to throw it around a little bit of being a devil's advocate. If you look at the way history is presented to not only them, but us, we all go to school in the same settings. Yes, certain people are taught to be the good guys, right? But just like these college professors, you college professors can attest to, is that we didn't really get that culture shock and pushed off the plane until we got to college and you took Black history for the first time. And you're like, whoa, shit. Like, if you didn't grow up in that house with that exposure to it all the time, especially myself, like, I got to college, took Black history in college and was like, wait a minute, I've never heard this shit like this before. Wait a minute. All these things happen. All of these people. It's not just Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and this Black Panther. Wait a minute. We got a whole bunch of things. So if you look at it from their standpoint, right, they're built in that. Their families have built property in that house, wealth in that. And this is what history has taught all of them. So it's not their story. You're basically telling them that their family told something to them that was true their whole life, and it's challenged by facts. That's a culture shock.
Well, that and the fact that, I mean, at its basic core, it makes people feel bad. Let's not skip over the actual emotional component to what do you mean I'm racist? I'm not racist. When you confront someone with that, their defensiveness, right, is what is triggered. So a lot of this that the anger, I think, comes from. Why are they mad? I think it's a defensive response to they don't know where this is going next. So because it could stop here, or the next thing you say could mean that I'm the bad guy. Yeah.
But BJ, what about those that go, oh well, screw that. You lost, I won. Because there's a group of people always that feel bad. There's also that group of people that look at you dead in your face and is like, well, we're winning over here and you weren't.
Yeah.
So
there are people who are Pigo.
No. So the only thing I was going to say, because I was going to address, why are people mad and just bring it back full circle to what's going on now. So if we think about critical race theory became this topic in 2020, 21. And the reason being is because what happened in those time periods, we had an election and then people started really paying attention to protests. And then they made a law saying that certain protests are banned. But then as you saw in some other situations, certain other protesters wasn't getting the same kind of laws or citations being passed down. So with those two things happening, people start to recognize, wait, what's going on? And if you paid attention to like social media, we started getting posts of black man does this was his sentence. White man does this is his sentence. Black kid does this is his sentence. White kid in the suburbs gives this is his sentence. So people started to pay attention now to, oh snap. It's always been there, but now they're like, oh, what's going on? So other races are now like, wait a minute. And now, of course, they're minorities and everybody's like paying attention. So next thing you know, it's, oh my goodness, what is this going on? And then education comes into the play and says, well, it's a part of critical race theory that's been around for 40 years. And that becomes the boom word. So people are mad because, to be honest, here's the answer. People are mad because minorities are starting to get educated. And they're starting to be like, wait, this has been around forever. And now y'all, we going to push the button and let you see it. And I think that's what's creating the angst and well, maybe if we remove it in this manner, we'll make a change. I'll leave it here. And doing some research, by the 4th grade, if you aren't a good reader or you're not consistently in a book, you're not going to be successful. So that's why it's in K through 12 that they're starting to pull things out. Because if you pull it out early, you're not going to be educated and understand it as you get older. So that's why people are mad, in my opinion.
I can agree with that. That's a good way to look at it too. I think, like you said, people are mad. Of course, nobody wants to be the bad guy, but I think people are mad too because everything is sugarcoated in society. Everything's it's a participation trophy of everything. Ain't no winners, ain't no losers. Yeah. In this aspect, what happens is that the kids are the losers because they don't have a true grasp of what really happened in this country. Because we can't get as far as we can without knowing what happened already. Right. So these kids are going to go, a whole generation of kids will be like, well, I never knew that happened just like we did. But now these kids are different. And I think what the real change is, kids be like, nope, you lying. I can look it up right now.
Oh, yeah. That's LaPaula.
Google did that.
Right here. Yeah. So that's why they want to take it out so much earlier because kids now, I'm like, man, you lying, bro. I looked it up right now. Nope, he had 10 points. So Jordan had 35, and I can look it up right now.
Yeah.
I got another one I'm dropping in, right? So how old were you or when did you learn about Black Wall Street?
College.
High school.
Luckily high school. I had friends growing up in Oklahoma who did not know about the Tulsa riots and did not know about Black Wall Street. They grew up in Oklahoma, right?
Yeah. I went to college in Oklahoma. I know. They did not know.
Right.
They did not know.
Yeah. That is what I'm talking about, right? It is, you are going to expose, right, the dirty laundry. You're going to expose the history. And people have already chosen sides. And the one more element to why they're mad is because we have, as a society, decided that we need to be in a gang. We need to either be over here or over there. And if my gang says this is evil, this is bad, then I got to ride with my gang. Rather than critically, not to, no pun intended, right? Critically examining the actual topic that we're talking about, people are mad because their gang is mad.
The crazy part about this is, P, you brought up a perfect example about black person, white person, right? Black woman in Ohio, black woman in Ohio, white woman in Ohio, black woman and white woman both were charged with basically embezzlement, stealing money. Black woman steals 30 something thousand, white woman steals 150,000. Same prosecutor, same judge. The white woman had did it for 20 years, black woman done it for like a year, right? This just happened like in August, right? Well, the black woman was who had did community service, started to pay the money back. Was going to meetings, all that stuff. She was doing everything she needed to do. She had a gambling problem. That's what caused her to start stealing. The white woman who had did none of that, prosecutor asked for both women to serve a year in jail, right? Both asked for both women to serve a year in jail. The white woman, the judge was like, nah, we're going to throw that out, give her probation. The black woman, oh yeah, she can go to jail, right? She can go to jail. It's crazy because same judge, same prosecutor, right? White woman did the crime for 20 years, took more money, and wasn't involved in any type of programs to kind of work on herself. The black woman still got a harsher sentence. So the reality is we live in a world where people want to convince people that justice is this equal thing, right? We live in this meritocracy in this world where everybody has an opportunity and grow and all that. When the reality is not. These things are staged for certain people to win and certain people to lose. So why people are mad is because more people are starting to pay attention, and they don't want their young people that they, because what happens when you live in rural America and you kind of live in your community, the only people you're around is your family. They can condition you to believe anything they want. They can condition you to believe black people are evil. They're going to break in your house. They're going to rob you, steal you, and rape your daughters, right? Because that's what they did to blacks and browns. But now their kids are like, nah, I have a black friend and they're not like that. Or nah, I seen this on the news. Well, daddy, why are you racist? Or mommy, why are you racist? So kids are starting to ask questions and they're mad. And politically, they're starting to see the things change, right? Georgia is now a blue state for now. They don't like seeing that. They don't like seeing the South go blue. So they're like, oh, they're getting nervous. We're getting nervous. So what do? In Texas, we passed a bill starting September 1st that's saying, hey, you're not allowed to teach critical race theory in school. And in fairness, they said you still can talk about slavery and you still can talk about the Ku Klux Klan. You can still talk about some of that stuff. But what they're saying is, hey, we don't want our white children starting to sympathize with issues that don't affect them. We don't want them to have empathy for their brother and their sister who have a different skin color. And that's why we're here. That's why they're mad. They're mad because they feel like they're losing the opportunities to manipulate and condition their children.
Well, but when you do that too, and you're teaching in that manner, you totally remove what any minority student may engage in that classroom. Like you made a space now where their voice is never heard, their concepts and the things that they want to contribute to the conversation can't happen because now they're like, I am not involved, nor am I nor do I see anything that relates to being a black kid. So now I just quiet you and pushed you back into the back of the classroom because now you're not relevant. And that's why those things are being removed, because now it's like, well, if we start you off not being relevant, then like you said, you're going to continue to just stay on that path and feel that way. So,
yep.
I think just from my career standpoint and just looking at other careers, the issue that I have with this is it just takes it further back to the questions that you guys always ask when we have situations with unarmed black men getting shot or police being involved in bad shootings, is that if you have no exposure or no education on the community and you're going to police in an area that is foreign to you, then your training becomes obsolete. You cannot just take a job that has social impact, life-changing impact, and do it in an environment that is foreign to you without having all type of hiccups come your way. And so there has to be a platform in which this continues to get discussed, right? Because even at my job, I'm a principal and policing instructor, right? So we talk about that, implicit bias. I do all of that. I instruct all of those things, but I don't have enough time in that hour block that you're with me, or that hour a year later that we do as a refresher, to catch you up to speed on all the nuances that aren't really nuances that we're talking about, right? I mean, you could even talk about in the area where I'm at, an affluent, predominantly white community, but yet there's still Black people that frequent there all the time. There's people of all races that frequent there all the time. If we don't even have simple things like critical race theory implemented in the educational system for young people, how do we expect people to go out and be fair, equal opportunity employers of businesses, or fair, equal opportunity of laws and rights that they can take away or, place power on in front of people? It is bigger than what we're losing a lot by losing that in the schools.
Yeah, I mean, but that's about to what Pete's talking about, representation. We need those representation of people that look like us, that are doing good things and doing different things or big things. And I think that's the push that we're getting now with a lot of the LGBTQ plus. And I think that's important for them and important for every minority to see people that look like them, that are doing whatever they want to do in whatever kind of space. But I think what's happening is when they talk about school, like a good book, like Tanasi Miko's book, Between Two Worlds, a good book to teach in high school. It's about a coming of age book, like any other book about like Catcher in the Rye. Like, why did that book, used in schools, versus Catcher in the Rye or Great Gatsby or whatever book it is? That book needs to be used too, because people can see like, oh, the Black experience, this is a good book. It's about coming of age, and it's some teachings that a father's teaching his son, but it's a good book that could be taught in schools too. We need to push those things too. And I think so this whole critical race theory ban thing is going to exacerbate not putting more Black and brown and LGBT things into the classroom. I mean, it's not good.
No, I think college is too late. Is kind of also what I'm saying, is that for a good portion of us, like Dewan said, he grew up with people that never even knew about these things like Tulsa or anything like that. Like I said, I didn't really get more educated on these things until I got to college. I think college is too late. I mean, now you got to break down a whole life learned patterns and behaviors of things and tell somebody, hey, we're challenging that and that's wrong. That's way too late.
So what and I'm sorry to do this because this is just who I am, but everything you just said contributes to now why I think things happen in policing. So sorry to bring it back there, but like you said, some police officers don't have to go to college. And if you don't hear about it in high school and you only take a couple of classes for college just to get that, what is it? I don't know how many units you need to become a police officer, but it's not like a bachelor's degree,
right? You need to be a barber.
About 60, about
yes, 40 to 60, I think.
About 60
you need to be a barber.
People.
But it's and I'm not trying to put it all out there, but it's not a 60 like these are courses that you need to take. It's a 60 of whatever you decide. You can go PE history class, and there's my 60. So what I'm trying to say is, if you remove these. Yeah, you remove these things from, like you said, from people who are going into certain industries and they don't have these conversations, and now they run into people with different backgrounds. It's like, well, you didn't matter at all ever. I'm gonna treat you like that.
Well, it goes back to this. I'm not gonna stand in front of and be the shield for that on what I don't believe is true or not to be true. I have to stand to what I individually believe is true. I do believe that everything in which everybody brought up a portion of today plays out in police departments, right? In general, not just saying mine or here or there. I think in general, right? We still have to look at the numbers statistically based on what we're talking about, and everything that we said here is that if that is true, statistically, police departments are in diverse places. So therefore, everything that you guys said would be true in most police departments statistically, right? Now, someone can say, oh, that's not true because I feel whatever, but statistically, it's still made up of a certain demographic more than others. And if that is true, then what you guys are saying predominantly probably plays out in a lot of your police departments in America. Now, in fairness to policing, to what magnitude does that play out? That's to each his own police department to answer that question, or their own structure or administration to answer that. But yes, for the most part, what you're saying here is inevitable for it to play out. And I think that's fair. I'll take that debate on with any police chief, captain, police, officer, all the way back down to sergeant any day of the week, because statistically this would be true.
Well, we with you, Tab, because it's like that, whether it's your department or any other, just like any courtroom as any other, it's the same thing because it's the system. My bad, Dewan.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that. No, go ahead, because I was just going to say that it's the argument of, since you brought up police, it's the argument that, hey, I'm not racist. Cool. We're not necessarily saying you as an individual who is a police officer, who is a white person, who is an educator, who is the manager of XYZ company, we're not necessarily saying you're racist, but are you participating in systems that were created based on racism?
Right.
Right?
Is it perpetuating or pushing the agenda of those systems?
Perpetuating, participating.
Yeah.
Well, what about this? Were the heroes in your storyline created out of moments in which we're talking about right now, right? Like, let's just think about it from their standpoint. If that is true and their history looks a certain way, and we're saying, hey, there's a challenge flag on that guy in your history over there. There's a challenge flag on this moment in your history right there. If you've created moments of victory, success, and triumph out of that, then ultimately, aren't you going to have some fault in your philosophies on how you move forward through what you learned through critical race theory? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's no escaping that on any given day of the week. I mean, it's just not. It's just like, even though this is a little far left, but in rap music, if we're listening to a certain type of rap music and we create heroes out of that certain type of rap music, and maybe their music is explicit towards women, or what if we were only to say we only mess with Too Short and Uncle Luke and things like that, then we would have basically just went with certain heroes in that music, which would have made us have a jaded experience or response to certain things. So in fairness to them, or not fairness to them, but in fairness to this whole conversation, your heroes might have been created out of some flawed moments that ultimately have an effect and impact on how you implement things once you become a person in power.
They made Jesus white.
Yeah,
that was actually surprisingly profound, Jacoby. Surprising. I like where you went with that. And
hey, every once in a while,
like a broke clock.
Every once in a while.
Time of the day. Your time of the day. I'm loving it. But all of this makes the conversation even much more critical and important, right? And I say that because we cannot move past this as a society if we ignore it or we demonize it. We have to have the conversation about why talking about race is so hard. We have to, and we have to. Then once we get to that level, right, then we can go into all these. We can talk about police. We can talk about education. We can talk about different industries and hiring. We can talk about the appropriation of Black culture and how that's not an issue, but then it is. So there's just a lot to be opened up once we can get to a place where we can talk about why race is hard to communicate about.
How the heck do we do that?
I think the problem is there's a couple of things. Like, let's play devil advocate, right? So let's be fair. There's not only, because when Texas passed this legislation, they came out with an approved book list, right? And they have Black authors on this approved book list, right, that are talking about Black experiences, right? So the question though is, as a Black man, as a father, right? We all parents on here. We all have children. So as a father, do we want certain people teaching our kids about race, right? Because if we're talking about it being something that history has spawned into this thing that could be subjective, do I want this teacher who doesn't really want to teach about Black Wall Street? Do I actually want that teacher teaching my kid about Black Wall Street? In fairness, as a parent, as an African-American father of an African-American son, do I want my kid to learn anything where he can be viewed or looked at as a victim, right? Because I want to remove that victim mentality from him. So do I want him to learn information in which he can be viewed as a victim? I'm playing devil's advocate.
But Dewan, as a challenge flag, do you have a choice, right? Like, I mean,
no, you do. You definitely got a choice.
How many people are removing their kids from teachers' classrooms?
No, you're not that. It's the addition to. So you read I Am Rosa Parks' book, but in addition to that, you reading this other book over here that we gonna talk about something else. So I feel like I said, one of our good brothers, Warren, he's a real deep thinker, and he got a whole list of Black books, Black little kids books, high school, whatever you want to take it to. But it's gonna be like, okay, they just taught you about Martin Luther King. All right, let's get you to some of this garbage. Oh, they taught you about some of this. Oh, let's get to this Frederick Douglass. So it's about us too. On top of that, giving them that, reinforcing some other stuff too. They're gonna get their regular book list, you know what I'm saying, that they get at school. But we're gonna have to, as a culture and as a people, give them a little bit more, and not just our culture. You know what I'm saying? We got to talk about what happened to the Native Americans. We got to talk about what's going on with the LGBTQ plus. You know what I'm saying? We got to talk about the other things that are going on in the world, because it ain't just us that's getting ran over. So when we talk about the systems, it ain't just us.
We got to talk about the Jewish community. We got to talk about
We got to talk about the Holocaust, etc. So it ain't just us that's getting oppressed or getting taken out of the step. We got to teach our kids about everybody. And I think as minorities, we try to, but we don't have the power.
How many people know that Asian Americans were put in camps? What they actually call what's the actual name of the camps though? They call
internment
concentration camps, internment camps, right? How many people know that Asian Americans were put in concentration camps during the late 30s and 40s in the United States of America, just because they were Asian?
In California,
in San Francisco,
in California.
Yep.
Yeah, had their property taken from them. Yeah,
right. I was gonna say, to your point, Dewan, is if you're gonna teach my child math and English, and now history is becoming one of the topics that you teach, just like Jeff said, yeah, I'm gonna trust you to teach them and I would want you to teach each side of that coin. And the reason why I say that is because, as we were just talking about this, the conversations need to happen. So if the conversations are only happening in certain pockets, then they're not happening in enough. So if it's not happening in the school system, or it's not happening where, yeah, you feel uncomfortable, sorry you feel uncomfortable, but that's a conversation that needs to start happening, so that my son hears it, as well as all the other kids sitting around, and go, oh, all right, I didn't think about it from that perspective. So that later on, it's not a shock when it's like, hey, don't say that around me, or I don't like how you conducting yourself in regards to my race. Like, that's not cool. So it's not a shock at that point. It's said early. So I would want them to. I want somebody to say it early.
I think application is key though too, and implementation. Like, for instance,
right,
we could talk about this in the classroom settings and all of that. It's still an academic setting. I do like real world experiences. So for myself, right, there are conversations in which we have, and conversations in which I have in my own household, conversations that, you know, we have in other groups of other people that we know that are similar to us, that not only I like my kids to at least float around, even if they're playing with a toy or just walking by, so that they can hear it, but also when I say implementation of these things that are happening, now that they know how I'm thinking, I may have to go to work and present a certain way, but I also have these things that I have to balance. I want my son to see me in real life action, how I'm implementing and I'm moving because of critical race theory. I want him to see how I carry myself when we're in certain different settings based on critical race theory. I think it's one thing to be taught it, but also the implementation of real life situations is way more important, because unfortunately, what we are talking about, as deep as it may be, this shit is not just black and white. A lot of it is based on real world, real life experience. What does critical race theory look like when you go interview for a job? You guys already talked about it, so I'll go there. What does it look like when you're stopped by the police? What does it look like when you go to the bank for a loan? What does it look like when you put your suit on in the morning? All of these things to me are the critical race implementation that I want to have deeper than the book, because you can capture a lot of stuff out of that, but how does that now look like when you're moving through the world?
Well, before, because you brought up a good point, like the book and the information and all that, right? So I blame, in tongue in cheek, I blame New York Times, right? So Nicole Jones, right? She did an article in celebration, or not in celebration, a recognition of the 400 years since the first slaves were came to North Carolina, right? And so she wrote an article. I don't know if you guys read it or not, but I'm gonna ask Dr. Snowden about what the 1619 Project is. But they put some things in the article that were upsetting to a lot of people, and I could see why, to a certain degree. Like they really challenged America to think about what America actually has done to the fabric of the Black community, starting with slavery, right? But you see your boy Trump, he had responded to a certain degree with that. Remember when he did the ban from all federal agencies and governments? They couldn't talk about diversity and inclusion. He was removing their funding and things of that nature. That was between this New York Times article and then Trump's ban that was overturned eventually. That's what kind of started these conversations, these debates that got everybody upset. So for those who don't know what the 1619 project is, Dr. Snowden, could you give us a
Yeah.
brief history of that?
Right. So this is one of those blendings between
Yeah.
journalism and academia, which is really cool. These are my favorite things in the world because it's art essentially, but it's also history. This is how we learn things, right? When you put you sugarcoat the pill a little bit so that you can take your medicine. And I think the 1619 project is a way for us to take our medicine as a country in regards to a very, very hard subject to talk about, which is slavery, right? This is a part of our history that is it's foundational, right? We are not the United States of America without slavery. We aren't. We are not the United States of America without the Civil War. We are not the United States of America without Black people, right? Blood, sweat, tears, and souls embedded into the foundation of this. So that project was something controversial because, again, it brought up stuff people didn't want to talk about. It's a way to explore in bite-sized chunks the real life history of this country. And guess what? Nobody wants to tell their family's dirty secrets. Nobody wants to hear about auntie's problems. Nobody wants to hear about the way your uncle was in 20 years ago. No, nobody wants to hear the old stuff, right? We want to focus on the now because, well, that was 400 years ago. And guess what? Shouldn't we be over it by now? So the project is just an opportunity to really explore the history of this country through a lens that I think is perfect for this time and place in American history. And it happened to win a Pulitzer, and it happened to be one of the most groundbreaking projects of the last 25 years. So going ahead, Google that, get some information, and review it because it's worth it.
Right.
Yeah, it has some good. It definitely has. I'll give the audience just a quick breakdown of some of the pieces because it's made up of essays and poems and stories and things of that nature. Some of the pieces that were in there. So you had America wasn't a democracy until Black Americans made it one. Right? Think about how offensive that would be to some people. American capitalism is brutal. You can trace that to the plantations, right? That's an essay by Matthew Desmond. How false beliefs and physical racial differences still exist in medicine. That's by Linda Valrosa. Why is everyone always stealing Black music? Wesley Morris, right? How segregation caused your traffic jam by Kevin Cruz. There's so many of these different essays and pieces in there that are contributors to this story that is a book. It's also a book that's coming out. It comes out next month, November.
Yeah, it comes out soon.
Yeah, it's a
no, I
book.
was going
So
to say
go ahead.
To your point, the bite-sized element of it is what makes it dangerous. The fact that the project really does force us to not take this as one voice, one perspective, one author. It is really a curated experience. So
yeah, it is. It is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal read. They got a lot of stuff in there, and it talks about how the prison system is rooted in slavery practices, right? And how that system is still a manifestation of what slavery was. And so it has a lot of things that are triggering and jarring in there. It's something that we need to be educated on and read and get more information in that regard. And so yeah, it's phenomenal. Brothers, before we jump off and we get out of here, what would you like to say? How do you feel about where we are in regards to where we're moving at educationally with the 1619 project? Do you feel like it's something that, I mean, not the 1619 project, critical race theory, is it something that we need to be arguing and debating about? in schools, or is it something that, shoot, 90% of American schools don't even talk about this stuff in the first place? So why is it such a big deal? How do you guys feel?
So I'm gonna say it's a big deal because if, first of all, over 23 states have already either banned, filed a bill, or are looking to address this and get it removed in some manner. So it has to be of some big deal somewhere for 23 states already to be making that move. And then second, it's definitely something that needs to be discussed because, like I was saying earlier, if you start removing these things young, by the time somebody's old enough to understand, it's not going to be in their vocabulary. It's not going to be something that's relevant to them. So yeah, this is definitely a topic that needs to be reviewed over and over again, just like a lot of other racially pushed topics. That's just my opinion.
No, I'm with you. I think it's very important to keep this going. I think we might have to implement more of this into schools. You know what I'm saying? Not this critical race theory itself, but the concepts that we spoke about in regards to educating our kids. Not critical race theory, as BJ talked about. That's over a lot of people's head. Of course, young people. But my 8-year-old need to know who Martin Luther King is, as well as Marcus Garvey, as well as Frederick Douglass, as well as what Lincoln actually really did. Not that he was the first president. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, those things need to be talked about. So I think it's very important to keep those conversations going and going a little bit deeper instead of it just being like, oh yeah, Dr. King was this dude, he got murdered at the, you know what I'm saying, over there in Memphis. You know what I'm saying? It needs to be deeper conversations. So conversations like this help push that 1619 project, things like that, push it. And I think it's on all of us, even as Black men, as fathers, et cetera, to keep pushing that to our kids and our the kids around us that we mentor and et cetera.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely important. I think when you think about just modern day, I mean, everybody doesn't have a circle like us, or maybe not everybody's having the type of conversations that we're having, but just giving it to some of the people who might find relevancy. And when you think about the impact of your Nipsey Hussles and your Tupacs and they die in your music and you're sad and you're like, man, we lost a great one and we're not going to get another one like that. And you think about how deep the lyrics was, the content, the history that was provided in that. All of these people are derived from moments in critical race theory on the Black side of the coin that you need to know about. They were inspired by that. Their music is an embodiment of those times. They are implementing practices through lyrics from one of those people, even people we haven't mentioned here, because it's not always just Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. The list goes on and on and on and on. However, you can find that when you educate yourself and stuff like that, you will find how important and the relevancy of your music today is to those things that happened before. And when you found that someone was speaking to you, especially from a place of economic disparity or, tragedies or traumas with the police, you'll find the correlation between that. So we got to continue to have those conversations, continue to find the relevancy in it in all areas, because it's going to continue to have a impact on our life. It had it in the past, it's having it in the present. And it will have it happen in the future as well too. So got to keep having these conversations.
No, I mean, all of you are speaking the truth. I would actually, I think my challenge is to, listeners and to us as a society is that we should be using critical race theory to fully explore critical race theory. And what I mean by that is that we need to recognize that racism is embedded into all of these systems. So why is it shocking to us that when we're talking about a system, that when race is brought up, people get mad, right? We need to continue to basically flood every industry with the voices from different perspectives and stop being silent about the topic of race. So we need a 1619 project every year. Every 6 months, we need the art to reflect the idea that we recognize race is embedded in all these systems. We need the education system. We need the financial system. We need all of these systems. And we need to, those of us in these systems need to be aware and aggressive enough to not be silent about race as an issue. And that's when we get to a point where people are like, critical race theory, that's nothing. That's nothing. That's just how, that's the daily operation. That's the business. But what we're really getting to in impacting change is being involved and not being silent.
It's tricky because obviously we care. Obviously, it matters. I think like Dr. Snowden said, having those proper conversations about the systems and how systems can be racist, and exploring those things, exploring our healthcare system, exploring our housing system, our banking systems, our educational systems, exploring those systems and identifying, because again, these systems were created for white people to thrive, and really not even white people, white men to thrive, right? And the crazy thing that I see as a result of, you see all these parents, you see all these mothers, you see all these women. I sometimes I challenge white women. You always remember that the feminist movement and white and women's rights movement came off the backs of the civil rights movement. So the reality is usually when black people are given something, everyone else benefits, right? So when we learn about the struggles of the African Americans, Africans and blacks, and we learn about our struggles here in America, then we're going to have to learn about everybody else's struggles here in America. If we learn about how we are not giving opportunity, we're not giving equity, then we learn how others are not giving opportunity and equity. So to be honest, unless you are a white male, everyone else should be behind supporting critical race theory, because the conversations will change the systems, and the systems will then benefit more people. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make sure the people who should benefit in these situations should be beneficial. Women are paid, at a less, I think it's like $83, 83 cents on the dollars than a man. Well, if we're able to talk about critical race theory, then we'll get to women's rights along the way, right? That's kind of how it happens in this country. The old age mantra is that especially I always tell my patients this: if we knew better, we would do better, right? But in this country, they don't want that. They don't want people to know better because they don't want people to do better. And so we need to understand that this is simply an opportunity for us to know better so we can do better. It's called informed decision making, right? And so that's kind of what I wanted to make sure I left with and parted with and things of that nature. Obviously, as parents, we need to do a good job of having these conversations with our kids. Before I jump out, the other day, I don't know if y'all know, but Wonder Years is back on, right? They got a new
sure, I know that.
Wonder Years
Yeah.
on Hulu, right? So my son and I, Daniel and I, we was watching it Sunday night, and I made a post on Facebook because his question was, Dad, what's segregation, right? That was the first question. He hit me with a bunch of questions. Dad, what's segregation? Dad, why did the man who what happened? Why did the man who killed Martin Luther King, why was they looking for him? Did they ever catch him? Like, he was asking, Dad, why did the white kids look upset when the black kid drunk from the fountain? Like, if y'all haven't seen that first episode of the Wonder Years, it's a banger. It hits, right?
Yeah, it's gonna go.
That is a conversation involving critical race theory. They're looking at it's crazy because they're looking at it from a black kid's perspective. We watched it was white family. Now they're looking at it that time, 1968, from a black family.
But shout out to Kevin Arnold, bro. He never did nothing wrong to nobody, and Wendy too, bro. Don't they still my people, man.
We all had a crush on Wendy. Now, you know what I'm saying?
I didn't like Wendy. You weird. Wendy wasn't cute.
You like Wendy? Okay, what about Topanga?
Yeah, but you was shooting dead ass wrong on Wendy. That's
time out. You're talking about Wonder Years or Boys or what? There's two different shows.
Yeah, we two different shows. But I'm going down the line now because he said Wendy was so was Topanga cute?
That's a whole episode. Why can we schedule that episode? Like
my bad.
We want to, going back in the day, we can talk about that. But that's a whole separate episode. Don't blend that with it. Don't bring that here.
That's what's up. Hey, Dr. Snowden, we really appreciate you, man, jumping in on here with us, man, and dropping that knowledge, dropping them gems, man. You can follow us at Braspective on Instagram, Facebook. Where else we at? Instagram,
YouTube.
Right. You can follow Dr. Snowden on Twitter at Doc Snowden. On Twitter at Doc Snowden. Right. Matter of fact, we're gonna bless y'all and do it the right way so people can get this free game that he be dropping on Twitter for y'all and post this in the banner. Right. But
hey, I appreciate this. Thank you.
No problem, man. We love having you. Like, subscribe, follow us. we dropping more information. Our next topic, we're gonna bring some people in and from the legal and HR world, and we're gonna talk about how COVID vaccine mandates are affecting your workplace and your industry. So, like, subscribe, rock with us. We rock with you too. Peace out.